The knife came down fast, and Lena Hart didn't hesitate. She threw herself between the blade and the elderly veteran beside her. Steel ripped across her side. She collapsed to her knees. Breath crashed out of her. The old woman grabbed her shoulders, panic in her eyes, begging her to stay awake. He froze for half a second, realizing he'd stabbed the wrong person, then turned and bolted for the door, trying to escape. But he never got far, because the ground began to shake. 40 motorcycles were tearing down the highway toward the gas station. Fast, united, unstoppable. Why were they coming? How did they know? And what secret tied this quiet old veteran to a biker army that doesn't forgive or forget? The blade flashed before Lena Hart even registered the sound of raised voices. It should have been just another scorching midday at the gas station. Sunlight bouncing off the rows of fuel pumps, the glass windows of the attached roadside cafe, reflecting the long, empty stretch of Highway 17. Travelers lounged inside the cafe with paper cups. Truckers leaned against their rigs, and the steady hum of engines blended with the clatter of plates from the kitchen. Everything about the moment felt predictable, ordinary. Then Troy Maddox stepped into the scene and rewrote the day in a heartbeat. Lena had been wiping down the counter inside the cafe, standing near the wide window that overlooked the pumps outside, when she saw Sergeant May O'Connor crossing the lot with her steady, cane-supported stride. The older woman always came around this time, always for the same black coffee she said tasted like diesel, but kept her routine intact. A service jacket hung loosely around her frame, faded from years of sun, and memories she rarely spoke about. Lena pushed the cafe door open to greet her. "You're early today, May." May lifted an eyebrow. "Figured the world wouldn't stop spinning if I got coffee 10 minutes sooner." Lena smiled and held the door. May's cane tapped softly as she entered, moving toward her usual quiet corner by the window. Lena didn't let her pay. She never did. "Coffee's on me," she said, already filling the cup. May huffed. "You're running a business, kid." "I'm running a cafe that likes you," Lena answered. The exchange lasted barely 5 seconds, but it was long enough for the world outside to shift. 3 motorcycles rolled into the gas station, engines snarling like animals that had gone too long without a fight. The bikes cut through the stillness, pulling every head in the cafe toward the window. Lena stiffened instantly. The riders were familiar. Too familiar. The kind who liked to pick at people the way others pick at scabs. Troy Maddox and his 2 shadows killed their engines, swung off the bikes, and strode toward the cafe's open door with the swagger of men who mistook fear for respect. Troy's boots hit the ground harder than necessary, his jaw clenched around a permanent sneer. May didn't notice them at first. She was stirring sugar into her coffee, her weathered hands steady despite the years behind them. But Lena noticed. Her stomach tightened. She took a step closer to May's table. Troy spotted the jacket before he spotted the woman wearing it. A bitter grin crawled across his face. "Well, ain't this a relic?" he said, as he stepped into the cafe, pointing at May's back. "Look at her, still clinging to that uniform like she matters." One of his buddies snickered. The other cracked his knuckles, eager for whatever came next. May didn't turn around. "Keep walking," she said calmly. "Oh, I'm walking," Troy replied, sauntering closer. "Walking right up to history. Tell me, Grandma, what war did you even fight in? The one before color TV?" Lena placed herself between him and May. "That's enough, Troy," Troy smirked. "Relax, sweetheart. Just talking." "No," Lena said. "You're provoking, and you're in my way." The cafe grew still. A couple of truckers shifted in their seats, but didn't intervene. The kid working the register reached for his phone. Even the cook poked his head out from the kitchen window, spatula hovering midair. Troy leaned forward slightly. "Let me guess. You feel sorry for her?" Lena didn't blink. "I feel sorry for people who think bullying veterans makes them look big." That did it. The grin on Troy's face vanished. His hand went to his belt. Something metallic glinted beneath the cafe lights. May finally turned slowly, deliberately. Her voice was low. "Kid, step back." But Lena didn't. She saw Troy's arm jerk forward, saw the motion before the blade fully cleared the sheath. Everything happened in a flash of reflected sunlight and panic tightening around her ribs. The world tunneled. The cafe blurred around her. Troy lunged. May couldn't move fast enough. Lena did. She shoved May sideways and threw herself into the path of the knife. A burning shock tore across her side, sharp, hot, stealing her breath. She staggered, but didn't fall, one hand clamping instinctively over the wound beneath her shirt. Someone shouted. The register kid dropped his phone. May grabbed Lena's arm, horrified. "What did you do?" "What I had to," Lena gasped, every inch of her trembling. Troy stepped back a little, surprised he'd actually connected. His bravado flickered. His friends stopped smirking. For the first time, uncertainty crept into their expressions. Blood pooled beneath Lena's fingers. The cafe patrons stared, stunned into silence. But underneath it all, beneath the hum of refrigerators and the ringing in Lena's ears, a new sound emerged. So soft at first, she thought she was imagining it. A low rumble, a vibration in the ground, growing, building, multiplying. Troy heard it too. He glanced toward the windows, brows knitting. Lena pushed herself upright, swallowing pain, hearing it grow louder. May's eyes widened. "No," she whispered. The rumble became recognizable. Heavy, synchronized, unmistakable motorcycles, dozens of them. Their engines thundered through the open air lot outside, shaking the cafe windows. The truckers looked out, startled. The cook cursed under his breath. Even Troy's friends edged toward the door. Lena turned her head toward the sunlight pouring through the open doorway. 40 Harleys rolled into the gas station, chrome flashing like mirrors in the sun, and every single one of them was here for something, or someone. The world that had started as an ordinary afternoon at a roadside gas station was gone. Lena felt it. May felt it. Everyone did. The storm had arrived, and Troy Maddox was standing directly in its path. The first Harley crested the rise beyond the fuel pumps like a black silhouette cutting through the heat haze. Then another followed, and another. The engines rolled in as one unified roar, shaking the bolts in the cafe windows. 40 bikes were moving with precision that didn't belong to chaos. It belonged to intent. Troy Maddox stiffened. For the first time since barging into the cafe, he didn't have anything to say. Lena felt May's hand tighten around her sleeve. Her voice a hoarse whisper, "Kid, stay behind me." But Lena couldn't move, even if she wanted to. Her legs trembled under the weight of shock and the blooming pain at her side. The cafe was suddenly too bright, too loud, too small to contain whatever force was gathering outside. The Harleys curved around the pumps in a slow, synchronized sweep, forming a wide half-circle that boxed Troy's bikes in like prey. The chrome caught the sun, blinding, unforgiving. The men riding them did not shout or rev their engines for show. They didn't need to. Power radiated from their silence alone. The cafe door swung open as one of them stepped inside. Ronan Vale, tall, broad-shouldered, weathered by road, sun, and life, lived at full speed. His beard was silvering. His vest carried patches earned, not bought. He had the presence of someone who entered rooms only to change them. He didn't look at Troy first. He looked at Lena, at the blood staining her shirt, soaking slowly through her fingers, at the wound she was stubbornly holding together with nothing but willpower. Something in his jaw clenched. Then he shifted his gaze to May. Recognition sparked, not of a name, but of a memory, distant and hard-earned. May straightened on instinct, her cane planted firmly as if preparing for roll call. Ronan spoke, voice deep and level. Which one? The register kid pointed at Troy with a trembling hand. Him. He tried to stab the old lady. He swallowed. She stopped him. Every head in the cafe swung toward Lena again. Her breath came shallow. She hated attention almost as much as she hated violence. But there was no hiding from either now. Ronan turned back to Troy. The room seemed to shrink around the man who'd swaggered in moments earlier. Troy Maddox wasn't used to being the smallest presence in a space, but Ronan tore that illusion from him with just one step forward. You pulled a blade on a veteran, Ronan said, voice calm with a cold edge. And you put a knife in the girl who shielded her. Troy swallowed, trying to find a scrap of bravado. It was a joke. She got in the way. Ronan's stare didn't flicker. There's not a man alive stupid enough to mistake that for a joke. The cafe grew so silent, the ticking of the wall clock sounded deafening. Outside, the motorcycles idled in a slow, rumbling heartbeat, like the earth itself was waiting for a verdict. May's voice broke through the tension, thin but firm. Ronan, leave her out of this. Ronan turned to her gently, something respectful softening the sharp lines in his expression. Hugh taught us never to leave our own behind. Lena blinked, confusion threading through her pain. Us? Troy picked the worst possible moment to speak. I don't know what kind of circus this is, but I'm not sticking around. He tried to push past Ronan. He didn't make it a single step. Two bikers appeared at his sides like shadows. One grabbed his arm. The other seized his wrist. The knife clattered from his grip and skidded across the floor. Troy yelped, shock flashing across his face. More bikers filed into the doorway, blocking the exit, forming an unmoving wall of leather, steel, and silent judgment. Their eyes were on Troy. None were friendly. May exhaled slowly, her shoulders trembling. Lena didn't know whether it was relief or dread. Ronan stepped closer to Troy until the man had no choice but to meet his eyes. You drew blood today, he said quietly. You drew it from the wrong person. Troy spat, though his voice shook. She's nobody. Lena heard the words as if they'd been dropped into water, echoing, distorting, sinking somewhere deep inside her chest. Nobody. She had felt like that for years. Another face behind a counter. Another person people forgot 2 minutes after meeting. But May turned sharply, fire flashing through her old warrior eyes. She's the only reason I'm standing here, and you damn well know what that means. Ronan nodded. It means she's under our protection now. The last word made the entire cafe hold its breath. Troy tried to pull free, panic creeping into his voice. This is insane. I didn't know who she was. That's your problem, Ronan replied. You didn't know who she is, or who she just saved. He tilted his head slightly toward May, and in that moment, everything shifted. May closed her eyes just for a second, as if something long buried had clawed its way to the surface. Don't, she whispered. Don't bring that up. Ronan's voice softened. The ghost hands were never gone, Sergeant, just quieter. The register kid's eyes widened. Someone near the window whispered the word under their breath like it was a myth. Ghost hands. May leaned heavily on her cane. There was fear in her face, but not of Ronan. Fear of memories she'd sealed away. That was another lifetime. Maybe, Ronan said, but some debts don't expire. Troy stared between them, confused and frantic. Ghost? What? What are you talking about? But Ronan didn't look at him anymore. He looked at Lena, at the girl who had thrown herself into the path of a blade without hesitation. And something like pride flickered through him. You saved her, he said quietly. You stepped in without thinking. Lena swallowed, the metallic taste of fear thick on her tongue. Anyone would have. No, Ronan said. Not anyone. Not even most. Outside, the engines growled in agreement. Troy made a last desperate attempt to yank his arm free. One biker twisted his wrist just enough to make him grunt in pain. Ronan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. We're not done here. But understand this. What happens next isn't up to you. May stepped forward. placing herself between Ronan and Lena. She wasn't tall. She wasn't young. But she carried a presence that could halt a battalion. "She's bleeding," May said, "and she's shaking. You can settle whatever you think you owe me after she gets help." For a moment, Ronan just looked at her. Really looked. Not at the wounded veteran, not at the fragile body, but at the strength still burning beneath the years. Then he nodded once. "Get her a chair," he ordered. The cafe moved. People rushed. Someone brought a first aid kit. Lena felt hands guiding her toward a booth she'd wiped down 100 times before. Her breath shallow, her head light. She tried to focus on May's voice, but couldn't make out the words. She heard only the engines outside. Waiting, watching. 40 Harleys at idle, like wolves guarding a wounded member of their own. And Troy Maddox standing in the center of a storm he never saw coming. The cafe's air felt heavier as Lena sank into the booth, one hand pressed to her side, the other gripping the edge of the table to keep herself upright. The room had shifted from stunned silence to a quiet murmur of tension. People whispered as if raising their voices might break something fragile and dangerous suspended in the air. Outside, the 40 Harleys idled in a perfect formation, their engines rumbling like a single living beast circling the gas station. Ronan Vale stood near the doorway, arms crossed, blocking the exit with the immovable resolve of someone carving a barrier between danger and what he now recognized as one of his own. May O'Connor hovered at Lena's side, her hand firm on the girl's shoulder, her face pale but steady. The tremor in May's voice betrayed her anger more than her fear. "Kid, how bad is it?" Lena exhaled shakily. "Just a cut. I'll be okay." Her voice said one thing. The blood seeping steadily through her shirt said another. She tried to sit taller, tried to breathe without wincing. The effort made her vision pulse at the edges. Troy Maddox stood several feet away, held in place by two grim-faced bikers who treated him like a wild animal that had bitten someone in front of the wrong crowd. He kept glancing at the door, then at the circle of Harleys outside, then at Ronan, as if the geometry of the room had become a puzzle he couldn't solve. His bravado was dissolving fast, dripping away like sweat in the heat. Ronan finally broke the silence. "Sergeant O'Connor," he said quietly, "you know what this means." May closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of old ghosts settling onto her shoulders. "I didn't call anyone," she whispered. "You didn't have to," Ronan replied. "Word travels when it matters." The register kid swallowed loudly. Is this about that ghost hands thing you said?" he asked, his voice cracking. The room stiffened. Even the bikers holding Troy paused, their grips tightening as if the word itself had force. May turned slowly, her eyes sharp despite the years etched across her face. "That's not a word you repeat lightly." The kid froze, hands up in apology. Lena watched the exchange through a haze of pain, trying to anchor her mind to something solid. The word "ghost hands" echoed in her memory. Ronan had said it earlier like it carried history, like it carried consequences. Ronan stepped closer to May, lowering his voice, but not enough to keep anyone from hearing. "The boys recognized you from the live stream. One look at that jacket, that was enough." May grimaced. "I never wanted that life to follow me." "It didn't follow you," Ronan said. "You led it." Troy snapped his head toward them. "What the hell are you talking about? What is all this?" His voice was cracking, desperation creeping into every word. No one answered him. Ronan's gaze moved back to Lena. "You stepped between her and a blade," he said. "A stranger. No hesitation." Lena felt heat flood her cheeks even as her body trembled. "I wasn't thinking." "That's exactly why it matters," he said. "Instinct reveals who you are and what you did." He shook his head. "Most people wouldn't." May's hand tightened around Lena's shoulder. "She shouldn't have had to, and yet she did." Outside, a few bikers shifted on their bikes, engines revving in low, muted growls like restless tigers. Someone in the cafe whispered, "They're surrounding the whole place." Someone else replied, "They're waiting for a signal." Troy tried again to yank his arm free, and the biker gripping him twisted just enough to make him gasp. "Let go of me. I didn't do anything wrong. It was a misunderstanding." "No," Ronan said sharply. "A misunderstanding is mixing up someone's order in a drive-thru. A misunderstanding isn't pulling a knife on a veteran." Troy spat on the floor. "How was I supposed to know she was—" May's voice cut through his words like a blade of its own. "You don't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect." Troy's mouth opened, then closed again. Ronan looked down at the knife on the tile floor, still glinting faintly in the sunlight seeping in from the windows. "Pick it up," he said to one of his men. The biker did, holding it with 2 fingers as though it offended him. Ronan took the weapon, weighing it in his palm, then held it up for Troy to see. "This is a choice you made," he said. "Not an accident, not a reaction, a choice." Troy swallowed hard. "I didn't mean—" Ronan's voice turned to steel. "Today you didn't just draw blood. You broke a line that should never be crossed." May shifted uneasily. "Ronan, don't." He turned to her with the gentleness that contrasted sharply with the storm brewing behind his eyes. "You taught us the difference between anger and intent. You taught us how to act with honor when no one was watching. You think we're going to stand here and let someone try to take you away?" May's face hardened, not with resistance, but with emotion she wouldn't let show. "That was a lifetime ago." Ronan shook his head. "Not for us." The cafe door swung inward suddenly, startling nearly everyone except the bikers. A couple of travelers peeked in hesitantly, but when they saw the frozen tension, they backed out immediately. Outside, the Harleys shifted formation again, closing the circle tighter. Lena felt her pulse slow and quicken at the same time, a strange dual rhythm of shock and fear and disbelief. Her vision blurred for a moment, and May steadied her shoulder. "I'm fine," Lena whispered, though her voice was growing thin. Ronan caught the change instantly. "She needs medical attention," he said. "Now." Before anyone could move, one of the bikers near the door said, "Ambulance is 5 minutes out. We already called." May blinked. "You called?" "We handle our own," the biker replied simply. Troy stared at him, then at Ronan. "You people are insane," he hissed. "I didn't sign up for this." Ronan finally turned fully to him. "You don't get to sign up. You started this." Troy's breathing grew shallow. "So what? You're going to jump me with your whole gang?" Ronan stepped closer, towering over him. "There's a difference between revenge and accountability. We're not here to beat you. We're here to make sure you can't run from what you did." Troy shook his head. "Run? Run where?" Ronan nodded toward the window. Troy followed his gaze and saw it. 40 bikes, 40 men, 40 engines forming a steel and thunder perimeter around the lot. There wasn't a direction in the world he could go. His knees buckled. May looked at Lena with something fierce and protective in her eyes. "Kid," she said softly, "you changed the outcome of today. You changed it for both of us." Lena swallowed hard. "I didn't want anyone hurt." "You prevented something worse," May replied. A siren wailed in the distance, closer, closer. Ronan stepped back slightly as the noise approached, but the Harleys didn't move. They didn't part. They didn't open a path. They were a wall. The ambulance eased toward the gas station, only to slow to a crawl. Its driver staring wide-eyed at the 40 motorcycles forming a wall of steel and leather around the pumps. The siren tapered off into an uneasy wail. The paramedics inside exchanged looks before stepping out, hands raised slightly, not in fear, but in a cautious respect reserved for forces best approached carefully. Ronan Vale met them halfway. He didn't shout orders. He didn't posture. He simply pointed toward the cafe. "She's inside. Knife wound, conscious but fading." The paramedics looked past him at the towering formation of bikers, and then at Ronan himself, calm, steady, immovable. One of them nodded. "We'll get her." Inside the cafe, Lena Hart was losing her grip on the world. The adrenaline that had kept her upright was burning out like a matchstick. Her vision pulsed around the edges, the colors of the room smearing into soft reds and browns. May's hand was still on her shoulder, grounding her. The sergeant's voice had shifted from firm to protective. "Stay with me, kid. Don't close your eyes." Lena blinked slowly. "I'm okay, just dizzy." "You will be, May. Help's here." When the paramedics rushed in, May stepped back, gripping her cane tightly, as if giving up that little bit of support cost her something. They lowered Lena gently onto a stretcher, applying pressure, checking vitals, asking questions she tried and failed to answer fully. "Pulse dropping," one said. "Get her loaded." The stretcher rolled toward the door and paused. Every person in the cafe stiffened because the path outside wasn't open. It was held by a wall of leather-vested men with unreadable expressions. Ronan stepped forwards, raising one hand. The bikers split in silence, parting down the middle like a tide bowing to purpose. The paramedics wheeled Lena through the corridor, created by 40 men who watched her with something fiercer than concern, something like loyalty earned in an instant. Lena tried to lift her head, confused by the attention, but the medic pressed gently on her shoulder. "Don't move." May followed close behind. The sunlight outside struck her jacket, casting the faded patches into sharp relief. The biker's eyes followed her too, not with awe but with reverence. The moment Lena was loaded into the ambulance, May made to climb in as well, but stopped when she felt a presence behind her. "Ronan." His voice was lower now, softer. "Sergeant May." May didn't turn at first. When she did, her face held a storm of resistance and resignation. "I told you, Ronan. That part of my life ended a long time ago." "For you," he said, "not for us." May's fingers tightened around the frame of the ambulance. "I didn't want this." "You didn't choose it," Ronan replied. "But you lived it. That matters." Lena watched from the stretcher, her breathing shallow. She didn't understand the full meaning behind their words, but she could feel the weight of them, like hearing a language she didn't speak, but instinctively recognized as important. Troy Maddox stood at the cafe doors, flanked by 4 bikers who weren't taking chances. His earlier arrogance had collapsed entirely. Sweat gleamed at his temples. His eyes darted wildly between the ambulance and the sea of Harleys. "This is crazy," he muttered. "All this for her? For some old lady and a girl I never even meant to hit? You can't keep me here. You can't do this." Ronan turned his head slightly, his voice carrying without effort. "You're still talking. That's more grace than you deserve today," Troy snapped. "Why? Why do you even care? Who is she?" May stepped down from the ambulance, planting both feet on the asphalt with a steadiness she hadn't had moments earlier. She faced Troy directly. "You almost took my life," she said, "and hers. And you don't get to decide who matters." Troy scoffed, desperation bleeding into his voice. "I didn't know who you were." May lifted her chin. "And that's exactly the problem." Ronan approached slow, deliberate. "You want answers?" he said to Troy. "Fine. I'll give you one." He stopped inches from him, the air between them prickling with finality. "She," Ronan said, nodding toward May, "is Sergeant May O'Connor, last surviving operative of the Ghost Hands." The paramedic inside the ambulance froze mid-motion. The cafe went silent again. Even the Harleys seemed to quiet, their engines idling lower, softer, as if the machines themselves understood. Troy frowned, confused. "Ghost what?" One of the bikers holding him hissed, "Shut your mouth." Ronan didn't raise his volume, but the weight in his tone pressed heavy on the moment. Ghost Hands weren't a rumor. They were real. They were the ones sent in when no one else could get the job done. Extraction, rescue, retrieval. They saved people who never knew their names. And 20 years ago, they saved us. May closed her eyes, grief flickering beneath her stoicism. "Ronan, no," he said gently but firmly. He should know. Ronan's jaw tightened. "Your little stunt today didn't threaten some random retiree. You threatened the last of the ones who saved an entire chapter of us. Troy's face drained of color. You think pulling a knife makes you powerful? Ronan asked. You just pointed it at someone who lived through battles you can't even imagine. One of the bikers chimed in from behind Troy. And she didn't even flinch. You did. Troy shook his head, trembling. I didn't know. Ronan leaned in, voice dropping to something lethal. Ignorance isn't a shield. Not anymore. Lena swallowed hard. Her vision blurred again, but not entirely from the wound. She realized she'd stepped into something ancient, something forged in loyalty and blood, and a promise made long before she was born. May stepped closer to the ambulance. Ronan, the girl needs the hospital. Let them take her. They will, he said. But hear me first. Ronan moved to the open ambulance door and looked directly at Lena, his tone gentler than she expected. You saved Sergeant O'Connor. And whether you meant to or not, that means you saved all of us. Ghost hands were the ones who pulled us out of gunfire, dragged us to safety, bled for us. We swore that if they ever called, even silently, we would come. His gaze softened. And we came because of you. Lena's throat tightened. I didn't. I wasn't thinking. I just moved. That's why it matters. May wiped at the corner of one eye so quick most people wouldn't catch it. Ronan stepped back, giving the paramedic space. Go, he said quietly. We'll follow. The ambulance doors shut with a firm click. As it pulled away, 40 Harleys revved in unison. A thunderous roar rolling across the highway. Not chasing, escorting. And Troy Maddox realized with a terror that reached all the way into his bones that his day was far from over. Troy Maddox had always believed he understood fear. He had lived off it, pulling it out of others, wearing it like a jacket, letting it fill whatever hollowness existed inside him. But as the ambulance pulled onto the highway and 40 Harleys thundered after it, forming an escort of steel and roaring engines, Troy discovered he had never truly experienced fear until that moment, because now he stood alone. The cafe door slammed shut behind him as the bikers holding him dragged him outside, not roughly, but with the unyielding grip of men carrying out a duty. The midday sun hit him full in the face, blinding for a moment. When his eyes adjusted, he saw the full formation, the stretch of motorcycles sealing the lot from every direction, a rolling fortress of chrome and muscle. The Harleys that were escorting the ambulance down the highway left behind a dozen riders to deal with him. Ronan Vale stepped into the sunlight, his shadow stretching long across the hot pavement. The rest of his men parted as he approached. No theatrics, no raised voice, just presence, dense and inescapable. Troy stumbled backward. You can't do this! Ronan simply stared. You can't just keep me here! Troy shouted, desperation clawing into his throat. Let me go. I'm not staying. He tried to run. 6 steps later he was tackled. Not violently, not painfully, but decisively. 2 bikers caught him by the arms, lifting him back to his feet like he weighed nothing at all. His shoes skidded across the gravel. Ronan took 1 slow step closer. You're not going anywhere, he said quietly. Not until this is finished. Troy's voice cracked. Finished? How? You going to kill me? If we wanted you dead, one biker muttered, we wouldn't be talking. Ronan glanced at him and the biker went silent. Troy's breathing turned shallow. Sweat trickled down his spine. The same knife he'd pulled minutes ago now sat in Ronan's hand. Not pointed at Troy, just held like a reminder of everything that had led to this. Ronan studied the blade, turning it slowly so the sun caught the edge. You know, he said, a knife is a coward's weapon when used the way you used it. Troy swallowed. I didn't mean. You meant to hurt someone weaker, Ronan interrupted. That's all that matters. Other bikers murmured in agreement, but none stepped forward. They didn't need to. Their presence alone felt like a verdict, waiting for the judge to speak. Ronan's eyes locked on Troy. Tell me something. When you pulled this knife, when you aimed it at the sergeant, what did you see? Troy blinked. I didn't know who she was. That's not what I asked, Ronan said. I asked what you saw. Troy hesitated, then spat. I saw some old woman wearing army junk. I thought she was another one of those washed up. He didn't finish the sentence. Ronan's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the air seemed to drop 10 degrees. You saw someone alone, Ronan said. Someone you thought couldn't fight back. Someone you thought no one cared about. Troy's silence was confirmation. Ronan nodded once. Now you know how wrong you were. Behind them, a few riders started pushing Troy's motorcycle away from the pump, clearing space in the center of the lot. Troy watched, confused, panicked. What are they doing? Making room, Ronan said. For what? For consequences. Troy's legs wobbled. You can't do this. The law, the cops will be here soon, Ronan said. And they will hear every witness, every camera, every detail. He stepped closer, his voice steady as stone. We're not here to beat you, Troy. That confused him more than anything else. Then what do you want from me? To listen, Ronan said. That answer chilled Troy more than a threat. Ronan's voice dropped quieter but sharper. 20 years ago, men like you surrounded us, outnumbered us, trapped us in a canyon with no cover. We would have been dead in minutes. Troy's eyes darted. What does that have to do with me? That day, Ronan continued, a small, silent team walked straight into the gunfire. They didn't hesitate. They didn't flinch. They pulled our wounded out one by one. He let the words sink in. Sergeant May O'Connor led that team. Troy blinked. His lips parted, but no sound came out. You pulled a knife on the woman who saved us, Ronan said. Saved our brothers. Saved men who had families waiting for them at home. Saved riders who now have sons old enough to ride with us. One of the oldest bikers stepped forward, voice gravel thick. She carried my brother on her back for half a mile under gunfire. Another, she dragged me behind a rock wall and kept pressure on my leg until help came. Another, she gave my son his father. Troy's mouth hung open. Ronan leaned in. And today, a girl you tried to stab stepped in front of that woman without knowing who she was, without thinking, without fear. Troy blinked rapidly, chest constricting. I didn't know. You should have, Ronan replied. You should treat every person like they matter because you don't know who they are, and you don't know who stands behind them. The riders around Troy shifted closer, not threateningly but firmly, closing ranks, making sure he felt the weight of that truth. Ronan pointed toward the highway where the ambulance lights were fading into the distance. That girl is fighting to stay conscious, and every mile of that road is lined with riders making sure she gets there safely. Troy's voice cracked. So what happens to me? Ronan stepped back, crossing his arms. Nothing yet. You'll face the law, and May will testify, and the footage will speak for itself. Troy exhaled shakily, relief mixed with confusion. And that's it? No, Ronan said, not yet. He nodded once, and the sound that followed echoed across the parking lot. 40 engines revved in unison. The vibration trembled through the pavement, through Troy's shoes, up his legs, through the bones in his chest. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder, a warning, a vow. When you leave this place, Ronan said, you will remember that there are people in this world who stand up for each other, especially when cowards like you try to break them. Troy covered his ears, overwhelmed by the thunder, by the pressure, by the reality closing in around him. When the engines finally dropped back to idle, the silence felt heavier than the roar. Ronan nodded at his men. Let him go. Troy's arms were released. He staggered, staring wildly between them. You're not going to hit me. You're not going to... We don't need to, Ronan said. You'll carry this day longer than any bruise. Troy didn't understand, but he would. He looked over his shoulder at the highway. The ambulance was gone, but the rumbling of Harleys following it still echoed across the valley like thunder rolling away. The ambulance's siren grew faint as it sped down Highway 17, escorted by a formation of Harleys flanking it like armored guardians. Drivers on the road pulled aside instantly, not because of the flashing lights, but because the roar of 40 engines behind them sounded like a moving wall of thunder. The sight was surreal, A medical emergency vehicle shielded on both sides by bikers riding with military precision, as though escorting something sacred. Inside the ambulance, Lena Hart drifted between consciousness and fog. Everything felt distant. The paramedics speaking over her, the oxygen mask pressed gently against her face, the rhythmic beeping of the monitor tracking each labored breath. Her body felt weightless, but her mind spun. She remembered the knife, the heat, May's scream, Ronan's voice through the haze. Ghost hands. She wanted to sit up, to understand what any of it meant, but her limbs were heavy, and the paramedic at her side pressed her shoulders softly. Stay still. You did good. You're safe. Lena blinked, trying to anchor herself in the chaos. Safe. The word felt foreign. Behind them, the trailing Harleys shifted formation again, tightening around the ambulance like a moving shield. Their engines echoed through the thin walls, mixing with the siren into a strange symphony. Half danger, half protection. One paramedic glanced out the rear window and shook his head in disbelief. Never seen anything like that, he muttered. Who are these guys? The older medic answered without hesitation. Men paying back a debt. Lena heard the words and tried to speak. Her throat felt thick. May, she's fine, the paramedic said. She's right behind us. Ronan's crew told us they won't let her out of their sight. Lena closed her eyes. The name Ronan felt heavy with meaning she couldn't yet decipher. Minutes later, the ambulance turned into the small regional hospital. A few security guards in Navy uniforms stood at the entrance, bewildered as the motorcycles swarmed in behind the emergency vehicle. They'd prepared for a standard incoming patient, not for a wave of Harleys bracketing the ambulance like a military escort. The lead biker signaled with 2 fingers, and instantly, the riders split into 2 lines flanking the walkway. Engines idled low, rumbling through the pavement. Their presence sent every nurse, orderly and patient in view, into stunned silence. When the ambulance door swung open, May O'Connor was the first person Lena saw. She had arrived in one of the trucks that followed the formation, and though she moved stiffly with her cane, her eyes were focused entirely on Lena. She stepped close as the paramedics lowered the stretcher. I'm here, May said softly. I'm right here. One of the nurses stepped forward hesitantly. Are they staying out here? Ronan appeared behind May, his presence filling the entrance like a shadow cast by the sun. Yes, he said simply. They're not going anywhere. The nurse swallowed hard. We'll need a bit of space. You'll have it, Ronan replied, nodding toward his men. Instantly, the riders stepped back 3 feet in perfect unison, forming a perimeter rather than a blockade. It was controlled, organized, respectful, and every hospital worker realized they weren't dealing with chaos. They were dealing with a coordinated force. Lena was wheeled inside, the fluorescent hallway lights blurring above her. May walked beside the stretcher, one hand gripping the railing tightly enough to whiten her knuckles. Ronan followed a few paces behind, speaking quietly into his phone, issuing orders the hospital staff couldn't quite hear. As Lena was moved into an examination room, May leaned in close. Kid, don't drift off. Stay awake if you can. Lena managed a faint smile. I'm fine. You're bleeding into your own shirt, May said. You're not fine. A doctor arrived quickly, gloves snapping on as she assessed the wound. Deep cut. Missed anything vital. But she's lucky. We need to clean it and stitch it immediately. Lena hissed softly as the antiseptic hit her skin. May winced beside her as if feeling the sting herself. When the doctor stepped away for supplies, Lena turned to May. Why were they there? She whispered. Those riders. Why did they come? May's jaw tightened. She stared at the floor for a long moment, wrestling with memories Lena could see but not hear. Then May answered with a voice that had carried orders through sandstorms and gunfire. Because I once saved them, and their leader believes debts should be paid. Lena blinked. Ghost hands? May nodded slowly. A unit no one was supposed to know existed. Extraction missions behind enemy lines. We pulled out people who weren't supposed to be left behind. And Ronan? May exhaled, her shoulders sagging with the weight of history. I carried him out of a canyon. He'd been hit in the leg. 3 of his men were down. We lost half our unit, but we brought them home. Lena stared at her, the truth settling like a heavy blanket. That's why they came. May shook her head. That's why they came for me. Then softer. But they're staying for you. Lena's breath caught. What? Why? May met her eyes. Eyes that were still but softened now with gratitude. Because you stepped in front of a knife, kid. For me. Without knowing who I was. Without thinking. Lena swallowed. Anyone would have. No, May said firmly. Not anyone. Most people freeze. Most people look away. But you moved. Lena opened her mouth to respond. But the doctor returned and began stitching, cutting the moment short. Through the thin curtain, Lena heard footsteps. Heavy, steady. Ronan. He didn't enter. He didn't intrude. He stood just outside the room, a silent sentinel. His men waited in the lobby, forming a protective ring that unsettled the staff but reassured the 2 women who knew exactly what it meant. When the doctor finally finished, she stepped back with a sigh. She'll need rest, a few days off her feet, but she'll be okay. May squeezed Lena's hand. Hear that? You're too stubborn to go down. Lena let out a fragile laugh. Good to know. The curtain parted slightly, and Ronan's silhouette appeared. He hesitated, as if waiting for permission. May nodded. He stepped inside. Ronan's gaze moved from the bandaged wound to Lena's tired eyes. You protected her, he said. You didn't know what she meant to us. You didn't need to. Lena shook her head weakly. I just reacted. That reaction, Ronan said, saved a life we owe everything to. May touched Lena's arm gently. And that, she said softly, means you're family now, whether you want to be or not. Outside, the rumble of Harleys intensified again. Not threatening, but resolute. Because while the ambulance had brought Lena to safety, the storm she had stepped into was far from over, and Troy Maddox had no idea what waited for him when 40 engines returned to the gas station he had poisoned. When the hospital finally allowed May O'Connor to sit beside Lena's bed, the sun outside had already begun to tilt toward late afternoon. The world beyond the window glowed in muted gold. But inside the room, everything felt still, suspended, as if the day refused to move forward until the 2 women breathed at the same rhythm again. Lena lay propped slightly upright, color returning to her cheeks, but exhaustion etched into every line of her posture. Her side ached with every breath, but the sharp fear had ebbed, replaced by a strange heaviness that wasn't entirely physical. She stared at the ceiling for a long moment before speaking. May, did I make this worse for you? She whispered. May let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. Kid, you made sure I was still here. She shifted her weight on the chair, the leather of her jacket creasing softly. You didn't make anything worse. You changed the whole damn direction of the day. Lena glanced toward the doorway, where Ronan Vale's silhouette had passed by twice in the last few minutes. Checking, watching, never fully entering. His men remained scattered throughout the lobby and outside the hospital entrance, their vests unmistakable, their presence impossible to ignore. They won't leave, will they? Lena asked. No, May said. Not until they're sure you're safe. Why? I don't even know them. May leaned her cane against the bed rail. You didn't know me either, but you stepped between me and a blade. You think people like Ronan let a moment like that slip by? Her voice softened, a rare gentleness surfacing. In their world, action means more than blood, and what you did spoke louder than anything you could ever say. Lena looked away, cheeks warming. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. That's exactly why it mattered, May said. There was a pause, quiet, steady, filled with something unspoken. Then May cleared her throat, the soldier in her returning. Listen to me. When I pulled his crew out of that canyon years ago, we didn't have time to trade names or stories. We just fought to stay alive. But when men like that make a promise, they honor it for life." Lena's voice dropped. "And now they think I'm part of that promise." May reached for her hand, gripping it firmly. "You are part of something now, whether you meant to be or not. Courage ties people together in ways fear never can." Footsteps approached the door again. This time, Ronan didn't linger. He stepped inside, hands clasped behind his back, his stance respectful but resolute. "They're prepping statements for the police," he said. "Every witness, every camera, every rider. No one's letting this get twisted." May nodded. "Good." Ronan's gaze shifted to Lena. "The town's buzzing. People are already posting videos. Half the highway's talking about you." Lena tensed. "About me?" "About what you did," Ronan corrected. "About how you didn't hesitate." She shook her head slowly. "I didn't want the attention." "You didn't choose that," Ronan said. "You chose to protect. Everything after that chooses you." Lena let the words settle, heavy and strange. She looked at May, then at Ronan, then toward the window where a line of motorcycles glinted in the fading sunlight. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Ronan tilted his head slightly, considering. "Now you rest, you heal, and when you're ready, you decide how much of this world you want to step into." May squeezed Lena's hand again. "You won't have to decide today," Ronan nodded. "But understand this. You're not alone anymore. A girl who stands in front of a blade doesn't walk through life without people watching her back." Lena's breath shook slightly. Not from fear. Something else. Something she didn't yet know how to name. Outside, an engine revved once, low, steady, like a heartbeat, reminding her that the world beyond the hospital walls had changed. Not violently, not loudly, just permanently. And somewhere across town, Troy Maddox would be learning the same truth in a very different way. Night settled slowly over the small regional hospital, turning the hot pavement outside into a sheet of cooling asphalt. The sun had dipped low enough that the sky glowed amber, and the rows of Harleys parked in formation outside caught the last light like polished metal sentinels. Their riders remained where they had been for hours, leaning against their bikes, arms folded, eyes steady. No one complained. No one moved unless Ronan silently signaled. They were waiting, keeping vigil for someone they had only met through the courage she'd shown. Inside, Lena Hart rested with her eyes half open, her breath steadier now, though exhaustion still clung to her like a second skin. May O'Connor sat beside her, refusing to go home, refusing even to step outside for more than a few minutes. The sergeant's posture remained alert, even though the danger had passed. She watched over Lena with the intensity of someone who understood exactly what had almost been lost. When Ronan Vale entered the room again, he didn't speak at first. He looked at May, then at Lena, then at the bandage beneath Lena's shirt. His jaw relaxed slightly, relieved to see she was no longer drifting in and out. "How's the pain?" he asked. Lena swallowed. "Better thanks to them." She nodded toward the paramedics outside. "And thanks to yourself," Ronan said. "Most people don't walk into a blade for someone they barely know." Lena looked down, unsure how to respond. May answered for her. "She didn't hesitate, not once. That's what makes her different." Ronan nodded. "It's what makes her worth standing for." There was a stretch of silence, the kind that was comfortable, earned. Outside the window, the bikers were rearranging their formation, two of them guiding hospital staff across the parking lot like polite but heavily armored ushers. A few people inside murmured in awe, still processing the idea that a young woman in a red cafe shirt had become the center of a story the whole town was now talking about. Ronan leaned forward slightly. "I spoke to the sheriff. They've got Troy Maddox in custody. The footage from the cafe, from the pumps, from every rider's cameras, it's airtight." Lena exhaled in relief. May's shoulders finally dropped a fraction. "Good," the sergeant said. "He won't be hurting anyone else." Ronan's voice lowered. "But understand this, Lena. That's not why we stayed." She blinked at him. "Then why?" "Because what you did today changes things. he said. Ghost hands were shadows. They saved us when no one else could. And today you did what one of them would have done. You protected without fear. You stood in the gap where others froze. May nodded slowly. Courage isn't taught, it's revealed. Ronan stepped back slightly, giving her space, but his eyes never left hers. You don't owe us anything. You don't have to be part of anything you don't want. But if the day ever comes when you need people at your back, real people, then know this. He paused, letting the words land. You already have them. Lena's breath caught in her throat. Her world had been small before today. Just a gas station, a cafe, a routine. But now it felt larger, heavier, filled with connections she never asked for, but somehow felt right. A strange mix of vulnerability and strength pulsed inside her. Thank you, she whispered. Ronan nodded once. Rest, heal. We'll be right outside. He turned and walked out, leaving May and Lena alone in the dim, quiet room. Outside, the night deepened, and the Harleys rumbled once in a low, unified growl, a promise echoing across the parking lot. May squeezed Lena's hand, her voice soft but steady. The world's not as empty as it feels sometimes. Today proved that. Lena let her eyes close, comforted by the truth of it. And beyond the window, 40 riders kept watch. Not out of obligation, not out of duty, but out of loyalty born in a single, fearless moment. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is simply refuse to look away. Lena Hart didn't know May O'Connor was a living legend. She didn't know 40 Harleys would thunder across the horizon because of one split-second choice. She only saw an old woman being threatened, and something inside her said, not today. In that ordinary moment behind a gas station counter, she proved that real courage doesn't need a uniform, a title, or a past worth bragging about. It only needs a heart that decides another human being is worth the risk. We live in a world quick to judge, quick to scroll past, quick to assume someone else will step in. But every once in a while, someone like Lena reminds us that one ordinary person choosing decency over fear can ripple outward farther than we'll ever know. It can call back debts of gratitude 20 years old. It can turn strangers into family. It can make hardened men on motorcycles stand guard outside a hospital just to say, silently, you matter. So here's the lesson I carry from this story. Never underestimate what your single act of bravery can start. You may never hear the engines coming for you, but someone, somewhere, will feel the ground shake because you refuse to let evil have its way. If this story moved you even a little, drop a heart or share your own moment of unexpected courage in the comments. I read every single one. And if you don't want to miss the next story that reminds us who we can still be, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're all writing tomorrow's legends, one quiet, fearless choice at a time.